My name is Owen Garrett, and I want to be upfront about something before I tell you this story. I am not a person who enjoys conflict. Never have been. My father raised me to put my head down, do the work, and trust that the right people would notice. For most of my career, I believed that. I really did. I spent 11 years at Meridian Systems, a mid-sized fintech company based out of Columbus, Ohio. We weren't a household name, but in the B2B payment processing space we were respected. Regional banks, credit unions, healthcare networks. They ran their transactions through infrastructure that I built. Not partially, not collaboratively in the way companies like to say in press releases. I built it. The core reconciliation engine that processed over $4 billion in transactions annually. The fraud detection layer that cut chargeback rates by 73% in the first year alone. The API framework that let us onboard new enterprise clients in days instead of months. I came to Meridian when I was 31, fresh off a contract with a defense subcontractor in Virginia. I had a background in systems architecture and a reputation for solving problems other engineers had given up on. My hiring manager at the time, a sharp woman named Dr. Time, Elaine Cho, told me during the interview that the company was technically capable but structurally fragile. She needed someone who could build something that would last. I told her I was exactly that person. I wasn't wrong. The first 3 years I worked 60, sometimes 70 hours a week. I didn't complain. I loved the problem. The existing payment infrastructure was a patchwork of legacy code and vendor band-aids that nobody fully understood. Every quarter, something broke. Every time, I fixed it. Then I started replacing it, piece by piece, with something clean, something I could actually stand behind. By year 4, Dr. Cho had moved on to a larger firm, which I understood. She'd recommended me for a senior architect role before she left, and I got it. The work kept expanding. The company kept growing. We signed a major contract with a regional bank consortium in the Midwest, and my reconciliation engine was specifically cited in the proposal as a competitive differentiator. The sales team used my system as a selling point. My name was never in those conversations, but I knew what I'd built. My wife, Sandra, got sick in year 5. Breast cancer, stage 2, caught early enough that the doctors were cautiously optimistic. Cautiously. That word does a lot of work when it's your wife sitting across from an oncologist. I want you to understand what that period was like because it matters to why I stayed at Meridian as long as I did. Sandra went through 8 months of treatment. I had good health insurance through work. I had flexibility because I was senior enough that nobody questioned my hours. I had a steady paycheck that didn't require me to interview anywhere or prove myself to strangers while my mind was somewhere else entirely. I stayed because leaving felt like a gamble I couldn't afford to take. Sandra came through it, completely clear, 2 years later, but by then the habit of staying had set in. I was 40, the system I'd built had become the backbone of the company's entire product suite, and I told myself there would be a right time to have the conversation about what I was actually worth. That time kept not arriving. Year 9, we got a new CEO. His name was Arthur Pennington. He came from a private equity background which should have told me everything I needed to know. Arthur was a trimmer. He loved efficiency metrics, quarterly targets, and the phrase, doing more with less. He had the kind of confidence that gets mistaken for competence. Polished, quick with numbers, good in a room. He did not, as far as I could tell, understand a single line of what we actually built. That first year under Arthur, he restructured 3 departments, renegotiated several vendor contracts, and took full credit for a margin improvement that came directly from an infrastructure optimization I'd completed the previous spring. I watched that happen in real time. I sat in the all-hands meeting and listened to him present my work as the result of his operational vision. I told myself it didn't matter who got credit, as long as the work got done. I was wrong about that too. Year 10, I finally asked for a raise. I want you to understand the full picture of what I was asking for, because I've had people tell me I should have done this years earlier, and they're right. They're completely right. But here's where I was. My base salary was $118,000. The market rate for a senior systems architect with my specific experience, fintech infrastructure, fraud detection, enterprise API development, was between $165,000 and $195,000 at companies of our size. I wasn't asking for market rate. I asked for a 30% increase to $153,000, which was still below what I could have gotten anywhere else. I prepared a 12-page document. Transaction volumes supported by my systems. Client retention figures tied directly to uptime metrics I maintained. The fraud detection savings calculated conservatively over 3 years. Revenue from contracts where my infrastructure was cited as a key factor. I requested a formal meeting with Arthur. His assistant scheduled it for a Tuesday afternoon, which I later learned Arthur had back-to-back calls before and after. 15 minutes, apparently. I walked him through the first 3 pages. He stopped me. "Owen," he said, leaning back in his chair, "I appreciate the effort here. I do, but I have to be honest with you. What you're describing, this is infrastructure work. It runs. Great. That's what we pay you to do. I can't justify this kind of increase for maintenance work." I told him carefully that what I'd built wasn't maintenance, that without it, the company wouldn't have the contracts it had. He smiled. The kind of smile people give you when they've already decided you're wrong and they're just waiting for you to finish. "Everyone on this team is important, Owen, but no single person is irreplaceable. That's how we build resilience." Then he sent me an email that afternoon, carbon copied it to HR and to my direct supervisor. The email thanked me for my passion and commitment, noted that my compensation would be reviewed during the standard cycle, and stated that the current budget did not support significant off-cycle adjustments. The whole team could see it. My supervisor forwarded it to me with a note that said, "Hang in there." I sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes after reading it. I want to tell you I went home that night and immediately started making calls. I didn't. I went home, had dinner with Sandra, didn't mention it, and spent the weekend trying to talk myself into being fine. I told myself Arthur was under pressure, that the budget was real, that I'd try again in 6 months. What actually happened was that I opened LinkedIn on a Sunday night and updated my profile for the first time in 4 years. I wasn't planning to do anything with it. I just needed to see my own experience written out, to remind myself of what I'd actually done. Within 48 hours, I had 3 connection requests from recruiters. One of them was from a woman named Priya at a company called Vantage Financial Technologies. Vantage was, for all practical purposes, Meridian's most direct competitor in our regional market. They had been trying to break into several of the same bank consortium deals we'd won. I'd heard Arthur mention them in meetings with an edge in his voice that told me he considered them a serious threat. Priya's message was short. She said she'd followed my work. Some of it was public, through technical conference presentations I'd done years ago, and that Vantage was building out a new infrastructure division. She asked if I'd be open to a conversation. Not a job offer, just a conversation. I sat with that message for a week. Sandra was the one who finally said it. We were doing dishes on a Friday night, and I'd been quiet in the distracted way she knows means something is on my mind. She asked what it was. I told her about the email, about the CC, about standard cycle and no single person is irreplaceable. She put down the dish she was drying and looked at me. "Owen, you have been the most loyal person to that company for 11 years. You stayed when you could have left. You built something real, and he CC'd HR to put you in your place in an email? She didn't tell me what to do. She didn't have to. I messaged Priya on a Saturday morning. The first call was a general conversation about the industry. Vantage technical leadership challenges, where they wanted to go, what they were missing. I was careful. I didn't share proprietary information. I talked in broad strokes about approaches, philosophies, problems I'd solved in ways that were mine to describe. By the end of the call, their CTO had joined. His name was Raymond, and within about 10 minutes I could tell he understood exactly what I was talking about in a way Arthur never had. Raymond said, Can you come in Thursday? I took a personal day. The meeting was 3 hours. I walked them through my architectural philosophy, the trade-offs I'd made on the reconciliation engine, the fraud detection approach, and why the industry standard at the time was getting it backward. I drew on a whiteboard for 40 minutes straight. Their engineering team asked questions that showed they actually understood what I was describing. At the end of the meeting, Raymond stepped out to make a call. He came back 12 minutes later. He said, "We'd like to make you an offer. We're thinking VP of Infrastructure Engineering, base of $210,000, plus equity, plus a signing bonus." I drove home in a kind of quiet I don't have a good word for. Not excitement exactly. Something more settled than that. I gave Meridian my 2 weeks' notice the following Monday. I handed Arthur a professional letter that said nothing about why, only that I was pursuing another opportunity. He read it, looked up at me, and said, "We'll wish you well, of course. Do you have a transition plan ready?" I did. I handed him a second document. 47 pages, full system documentation for everything I'd built, architecture diagrams, dependency maps, runbooks for every failure mode I'd ever encountered. I had spent 3 weekends putting it together, because I am not the kind of person who burns a bridge just to watch it burn. I wanted to leave clean. What I did not do was leave behind the proprietary frameworks I had developed independently, on my own time, documented separately from company systems, which formed the foundation of what I'd brought to my conversations with Vantage. I had been careful about this for years, not because I anticipated this moment, but because I was trained early to know what belongs to you and what doesn't. My last day was a Thursday. A few colleagues took me to lunch. My supervisor, a quiet man named Douglas, shook my hand and said, "You held this place together longer than anyone will say out loud." That meant something. The first 6 months at Vantage were the hardest kind of hard. The good kind, building from scratch, with a team that asked real questions, with leadership that understood what I was saying. I was making decisions in weeks that at Meridian would have taken quarters. My direct reports were sharp, curious, not beaten down by bureaucracy. I remembered what it felt like to like Monday mornings. About 4 months in, I started hearing things through the industry grapevine. Meridian had lost a major renewal with the bank consortium. The consortium's technical team had flagged concerns about infrastructure stability. There had been outages, 2 of them in the same quarter. An engineering firm had been brought in to assess the system, and the report, which a former colleague shared with me in confidence, described the code base as critically underdocumented and architecturally dependent on institutional knowledge that is no longer present. Institutionally dependent knowledge that is no longer present. That was me. I won't pretend I felt nothing reading that. I felt something I'm not entirely proud of. A cold, specific satisfaction that I immediately tried to set aside. I had left 47 pages of documentation. The problem wasn't that I hadn't tried to transfer knowledge. The problem was that nobody at Meridian had invested in understanding the system while I was there. They had assumed it would keep running because it always had, which is exactly what happens when a CEO treats infrastructure as maintenance and the people who build it as replaceable. Then Arthur called me. I almost didn't answer. It was a Saturday morning, his name on my screen, and my first instinct was to let it go to voicemail. I picked up. He told me the company was facing a critical situation, that the engineering team was struggling with the reconciliation system, that a key client had flagged performance issues. He said, and I am quoting this as accurately as I can, "We underestimated the complexity of what you'd built, Owen. I'm asking if you'd be willing to come in as a consultant, short-term, to help stabilize things." There was a silence. "What's the rate?" I asked. He named a number. It was higher than anything I'd made per hour at Meridian, but it was a fraction of what it would actually cost them to rebuild what had broken. I told him I needed to think about it. I talked to Sandra. I talked to Raymond. Both of them, for different reasons, told me the decision was mine. Sandra said, "You don't owe him anything, but you also know yourself." "What do you want to do?" Raymond said. "If you do it on your terms." Don't do it out of guilt. I called Arthur back and said I couldn't take the engagement. Not because I wanted to watch Beridian fail, but because my capacity was genuinely committed to building something advantage, and I wasn't willing to split my attention for a company that had made its position clear about what I was worth. He didn't argue. He said, "I understand." His voice was flat in a way I recognized as a man processing something he didn't expect. What I did do was reach out to 2 former colleagues, people I'd worked closely with, people who knew the system, and let them know that if they were open to a conversation, Vantage was building something worth being part of. One of them, a developer named Chris, who'd been at Meridian for 8 years, called me within a day. He was gone within 60 days. The other, a QA lead I'd mentored named Alexis, reached out 3 months later. She'd been passed over for a promotion that everyone agreed she'd earned. She joined us the following quarter. I didn't recruit them out of revenge. I want to be honest about that. I reached out because they were good, and because I knew what it was like to stay somewhere long past when you should have left. If the situation had been different, maybe they'd have stayed, but it wasn't different. Vantage won the bank consortium contract Meridian lost. That happened at the end of my first year. Raymond sent a bottle of bourbon to my office with a note that just said, "This is yours." I keep the bottle on the shelf in my home office. I haven't opened it. I don't need to. The equity I received at signing is worth considerably more than I paid for it. I chair a team of 19 engineers. Last quarter, we processed over $6 billion in transactions without a single major incident. We onboarded a healthcare network in 11 days. I present at 2 or 3 industry conferences a year, and for the first time, I do it with my actual employer's name on the slide. I'm 51 now. I have a good marriage, a paid-off mortgage in a suburb of Columbus where I know my neighbors' names, and a job that challenges me without diminishing me. I coach youth baseball on Saturdays in the spring. Small life, in the best way. If there's something I want anyone to take away from this, it's not that patience is stupid or that loyalty is a scam. I don't believe either of those things. What I believe is this: loyalty is a two-way obligation. When the company knows what you've built, uses it to grow, and then tells you to your face, and by email CC'd to HR, that no single person is irreplaceable, they are giving you information. They are telling you exactly what the relationship is. The only mistake I made was taking too long to believe them. Sandra still laughs about the fact that I updated my LinkedIn on a Sunday night with no plan and ended up with a VP title in equity within 4 months. She says it's the most accidental act of self-respect she's ever witnessed. She's probably right. I'm not telling this story to make Arthur the villain in a movie. He made a business decision the way he understood business decisions. He was wrong about what I was worth, wrong about what was replaceable, wrong about what was replaceable, wrong about what would happen when I left. Those were his mistakes to make. I just stopped waiting for him to make different ones. I've thought a lot about what made Arthur do what he did, not the decision itself, denying a raise. That's a business call. People make those. But the email, the CC, the deliberate choice to copy HR and my supervisor so that everyone could see me being put in my place, that part wasn't a business decision. That was a message. And the message was, you don't matter enough to be handled privately. What I understand now, and didn't fully understand then, is that people like Arthur don't suddenly become that way in the moment. He'd been that person the whole time. I just hadn't been looking at him closely enough because I was too focused on the work. That's the trap that catches a lot of us who genuinely love what we do. We assume that if we care about the work, the people above us must care about us. That's not cause and effect. That's just wishful thinking dressed up as loyalty. The hard part of telling this story honestly is admitting how long I waited. 11 years is a long time to undervalue yourself. And I had reasons. Sandra's illness, the insurance, the stability, those were real. But I also know that somewhere around year 7 or 8, the reasons became excuses. The situation had changed. Sandra was healthy. The risk of leaving was lower than it had ever been. And I still stayed, because staying had become a habit I hadn't examined. What finally moved me wasn't ambition. It wasn't anger, even after the email. It was something quieter than that. It was reading my own experience written on a LinkedIn profile and recognizing for the first time in years that I was worth more than what I was accepting. That recognition, not the outrage, not the opportunity, just that quiet recognition was what actually changed things. I think that's where real decisions come from, not from being pushed hard enough by someone else's cruelty, but from getting honest enough with yourself that you stop waiting for someone else to confirm what you already know. Raymond understood what I'd built within 40 minutes of meeting me. 40 minutes. Arthur had 11 years and never got there. That's not a knock on Arthur's intelligence. It's a statement about attention. Raymond was paying attention because he was looking for something worth finding. Arthur wasn't paying attention because he'd already decided I was maintenance. What you look for shapes what you see. What you value shapes what you build. Arthur valued margin improvement and quarterly optics. He got a company that lost its bank consortium contract and couldn't explain its own infrastructure. I'm not saying that to gloat. I'm saying it because there's a real lesson in the mechanics of it. When you consistently undervalue the people who build real things, eventually the real things stop working. That's not fate. That's just the natural consequence of a set of choices, playing out the way choices always do over time. What I want to say to anyone sitting where I was sitting, loyal, capable, quietly underpaid, telling yourself there will be a better time. Is this the right time does not arrive on its own. It exists when you decide it does. I took one Sunday night, opened a page I hadn't touched in 4 years and wrote down what I'd actually done. That was the whole beginning. Everything else followed from that one honest act. Integrity isn't just about how you treat other people. It's also about whether you're honest with yourself, about what you've earned and what you deserve. I failed at that for years. When I stopped failing at it, things changed quickly. Not magically, not without effort, but quickly, because the work was already done. I just had to be willing to stand in front of it and say, "This is mine."